The first thing they taught us in the Signal Corps was simple: when the line goes dead, people can die. That lesson followed me every day I served in Cambodia. In the early rainy season of 1983, our communications platoon was attached to an infantry battalion operating near a small village called Poom Leach. It wasn't a famous place. There were no major battles there, no headlines, and no medals waiting for anyone. But for us signal soldiers, even a forgotten village could become the center of the war if the radios went silent. I was 23 years old then, carrying more wire than ammunition. My closest teammate was Wa, a quiet man from Nam Dinh. Every evening, after checking our field telephone, he'd unfold a worn photograph of his fiancée and stare at it for a few minutes before slipping it back into his shirt pocket. He rarely talked about home, but whenever he did, it was about the small brick house he hoped to build after his service ended. The youngest in our team was Tan, barely 20. He could fix almost anything with a pocket knife and a piece of wire. He used to joke that once the war was over, he'd become an electrician because broken wires make more sense than broken people. That morning started before sunrise. Our battalion command post had lost all telephone communication with a forward company stationed near Poom Leach. Radio contact was weak because the thick jungle canopy and rolling terrain interfered with the signal. The only reliable connection was the field telephone cable that stretched for several kilometers through dense forest. And that line had suddenly gone dead. Our lieutenant handed me a field telephone, 2 spare batteries for the radio set, a fresh spool of communication wire, and a short order: find the break, restore the line, no excuses. We checked our equipment one last time. The old radio rested heavily against my back. The field telephone swung from Hoa's shoulder. Tan carried the wire spool, which seemed to grow heavier with every kilometer we walked. My dented canteen bumped against my hip with every step, its metal sides scarred from months of jungle patrols. Breakfast was nothing more than a handful of dried rice soaked in canteen water. It wasn't much, but after enough weeks in the jungle, you stopped expecting warm meals. The rain had fallen all night. The forest smelled of wet earth, rotting leaves, and bamboo. Everything was damp. Our uniforms clung to our skin. Mosquitoes swarmed around us despite the smoke from our insect coils the night before. My legs still ached from a recent bout of malaria, but nobody complained. Signal soldiers learned early that radios and telephone lines didn't care whether you were tired or sick. As we followed the cable deeper into the jungle, every few hundred yards we stopped to test the line. Nothing. No dial tone. No signal. Only silence. Silence was something every signal soldier feared. A rifle could jam, a truck could break down, but when communications disappeared, entire units became blind. About 2 hours into our search, the weather turned even worse. Heavy rain pounded the jungle canopy so hard that we could barely hear each other speak. Tan suddenly raised his hand. "Hold up." He knelt beside the cable, disappearing into thick mud. His smile faded. The wire didn't look snapped by a falling branch. It had been cut. Cleanly. With a sharp blade. The 3 of us exchanged silent glances. Someone had been here after we laid that line. And whoever it was might still be somewhere ahead. The cut in the wire changed everything. Before that, we had been thinking like repairmen. A fallen branch, a wet connector, a loose splice buried under mud. Those were the usual problems. You found the damage, cleaned the ends, twisted the copper back together, wrapped it tight, and moved on. But a clean cut was different. A clean cut meant hands. Wa crouched beside the wire and touched the 2 severed ends with his fingertips. He did not speak right away. Rainwater ran from the brim of his helmet and dripped onto the mud between his boots. Tan stood behind him with the wire spool still on his shoulder. His face no longer carrying that easy grin of his. I looked toward the trees ahead. The jungle near Poom Leach was thick and low, full of bamboo, thorn bushes, and old footpaths that appeared and disappeared without warning. The rain made everything look closer than it really was. Every leaf moved, every dark space between the trees seemed to be watching us. "Blade cut," Wah said quietly. I nodded. "Can you fix it?" He gave me a look, almost offended. "Of course I can fix it." That was Wah. Calm hands, calm voice. If a shell landed beside him, he would probably still finish wrapping a wire splice before ducking. While he worked, I pulled the field telephone from its canvas case and checked the handset. The black rubber was cracked near the mouthpiece, and the cord had been repaired so many times it looked like an old snake. I cranked the handle, listened, waited. Nothing. Only a flat deadness in my ear. Tan moved a few yards out and watched the trail behind us. He held his AK low, not aiming at anything, just ready. None of us wanted trouble. We were signal soldiers, not assault troops. Our job was to keep voices moving from one unit to another. Orders, warnings, requests for medics, reports of movement. All of it depended on thin copper wire laid through wet jungle. After a few minutes, Wah finished the splice and wrapped it with tape from a small roll he kept inside his shirt to keep it dry. I cranked the phone again. This time there was a faint click. Then a burst of static. Then a voice, thin and broken, came through. "Command post, this is Forward Company, do you read?" I felt my chest loosen. "Forward Company, this is Signal Team on the line. We read you weak but clear. Stand by." Tan smiled for half a second. Then the voice disappeared. The line went dead again. I cranked harder, as if muscle could force sound back through copper. Nothing. Wah stared at the wire in his hands. "There's another break." Nobody said what we were all thinking. If there was one clean cut, and then another, this was not weather. Someone had moved along our line, cutting it in sections, making sure the battalion stayed blind. Rain hammered the leaves above us. Water ran down my neck and into my collar. My malaria chills had started again. That deep shaking inside the bones. But I pushed it down. There was no room for sickness on a dead line. We moved forward slower now. Wah traced the cable with the patience of a man sewing a wound. Tan climbed over a fallen tree and lifted the wire out of a pool of muddy water. I kept the radio set close, switching channels, trying to catch any signal from the command post or the Forward Company. The battery gauge was already dropping. Wet weather drained everything faster: batteries, strength, patience. Every 50 yards, we stopped and tested. Still dead. Then Tan whistled softly. Not loud, just enough for us to freeze. Ahead of him, the wire ran across a narrow stream, tied high to a branch on one side and hanging loose on the other. The far end had been pulled down and dragged into the water. Beneath the brown current, I could see the pale copper glinting where the insulation had been stripped. Hoa's jaw tightened. Whoever did this knew what he was doing, he said. We stood there in the rain. 3 signal soldiers with one broken line in a jungle full of questions. Then, from somewhere beyond the stream, a branch cracked. Not from the rain. From a footstep. For one brief moment, we thought we had beaten the jungle. Wah finished repairing the stripped section by the stream with hands so steady they almost made the whole thing look easy. He scraped the copper clean with his knife, twisted the ends together, wrapped them tight with black tape, then lifted the wire higher onto a branch so the muddy water would not touch it again. I knelt beside the field telephone and turned the crank. A rough buzz came through the handset. Then a voice. Signal team, this is Battalion Command. Report your position. I pressed the handset hard against my ear, afraid the sound might vanish if I breathed too loudly. Command, this is Signal team. We found 2 cuts in the line. Both repaired. We are near the stream west of Poom Leach. Connection is weak but open. There was a pause. Then the battalion commander's voice came in, broken by static. "Keep that line alive. Forward company is waiting for orders. You understand?" "I understand." That was all he needed to say. In war, some sentences are heavier than others. Keep that line alive meant more than fixing wire. It meant men ahead of us were sitting in wet holes, watching tree lines, waiting for instructions they could not receive. It meant a wrong delay could send one unit too far forward or leave another exposed. It meant our thin cable, running through mud and leaves, was holding pieces of the battalion together. Tan let out a breath and gave me a tired grin. "Maybe we'll get dry socks tonight," he said. Wah did not laugh. He was already looking down the line. Then the handset went silent. No click. No buzz. Nothing. I cranked again. Still nothing. Tan's grin disappeared. Wah closed his eyes for half a second, like a man swallowing anger. "Another one," he said. Nobody cursed. We were too tired for that. The rain had softened into a cold drizzle, but the forest was darker now. Afternoon was slipping away. In Cambodia, darkness did not fall slowly in the jungle. It dropped fast, like someone throwing a blanket over your head. I checked the radio. The battery needle trembled near the low mark. I switched to the battalion frequency and called twice. Only static answered. The canopy above us was too thick, and the wet air seemed to swallow every transmission. We had two choices. Return to command post and report that the line could not be secured before nightfall. Or keep moving toward Poom Leach and find the next cut. Going back would be safer. Going forward was the job. Wall looked at me. I was the senior man in the three-man team, though I never felt old enough for that responsibility. "What do you think?" he asked. I looked at Tan. He was young, soaked, shivering, but waiting for my decision like it was the most natural thing in the world. That was the hard part about command. Even small command. Men looked at you, and you had to pretend you were more certain than you were. "We keep going," I said. Tan nodded right away. Wah only adjusted the field telephone strap on his shoulder. We moved again. The wire led us up from the stream into a stretch of thick brush. Twice, Tan had to crawl under thorn vines with the spool pressed to his chest. Wah followed the cable inch by inch, feeling for damage with his fingers. I walked between them, one hand on the radio, one hand on my rifle. By then my fever had returned. Malaria had a way of reminding you it lived inside your bones. My shirt was soaked, but I could not tell what was rain and what was sweat. After another half hour, we found the third break. This one was worse. The wire had not just been cut. A whole section had been pulled away, maybe 20 yards of it, leaving only loose ends buried under wet leaves. Whoever had done it wanted us to lose time. Tan stared at the missing stretch. "We don't have enough spare wire if this keeps happening," he said. I opened my pack and checked the roll. He was right. For a moment, none of us moved. The jungle around Poom Leach had gone quiet. Too quiet. Then the field radio on my back cracked with a faint burst of sound. Through the static came only 3 words from command. "Urgent. Hold contact." We did not answer the radio right away. The 3 words from command, "Urgent. Hold contact," hung in the wet air like an order and a warning at the same time. I lifted the handset of the field telephone again. Even though I knew the line was dead, sometimes a man does useless things just to keep his hands from shaking. Wah was already cutting a fresh length from the spare wire. Tan helped him unwind it carefully, making sure it did not twist into knots. In the jungle, a tangled wire could waste more time than a bullet. I took the radio off my back, wiped the rain from the dial with my sleeve, and tried again to reach battalion command. Static. Then a broken voice. "Signal team, confirm, still online?" I pressed the transmit key. "Command, this is signal team. Telephone line cut in multiple places. We are repairing and moving toward Poomleach. Radio contact weak. We will hold as long as batteries last. Only static answered. I looked at the battery meter. It was low enough to make my stomach tighten. We had one spare battery left. After that, we would be just 3 men in the forest with wire, a field phone, and too much silence. Wah finished the splice and tested the repaired section by tugging it gently. It will hold, he said. That was all we needed. We pushed forward. The closer we got to Poomleach, the stranger the jungle became. The path widened just enough for an oxcart, but no cart had used it in a long time. Grass grew through the ruts. Rainwater filled old footprints. A broken cooking pot lay beside the trail, half buried in mud. Farther ahead, we saw the first huts through the trees, low roofs, bamboo walls, dark doorways. No smoke. No voices. No dogs barking. That bothered me more than gunfire would have. A village should make some kind of sound. Children crying, chickens scratching, someone chopping wood, somebody coughing in a doorway. But Poomleach sat in the rain as if everyone had stepped away at the same moment and never returned. Tan whispered, "You think civilians are still here?" "I don't know," I said. It was the only honest answer. That was one of the hardest things about that war. From a distance, everything looked the same. A farmer's trail, a supply path, a village hut, a hiding place. The Pon Pot forces did not always wear signs telling you who they were. And the civilians, the poor civilians, were trapped between every armed man who came through their village. Wah pointed to the wire. It ran along the tree line, then disappeared behind the first empty hut. "Line goes through the edge of the village," he said. I hated that. A wire in open jungle was hard enough to protect. A wire near houses, fences, cooking sheds, and footpaths could be cut from 10 different places. Anyone could walk past it and damage it in seconds. We moved carefully between the huts. Tan went first, his AK lowered but ready. Wah followed the wire, bent slightly, his eyes never leaving the ground. I stayed behind them with the radio, listening to the forest and watching the doorways. Inside one hut, I saw a sleeping mat rolled against the wall. In another, a small wooden bowl sat upside down near cold ashes. Whoever lived there had left in a hurry, or had been made to leave. The rain softened to mist. That made every sound sharper. A drop falling from a roof. A lizard moving through dry leaves. The click of Tan's safety lever under his thumb. Near the far end of the village, we found fresh tracks in the mud. Bare feet, small, not many hours old. Wah crouched down and studied them. "Someone passed here after the rain," he said. Tan looked toward the last hut. "Man?" Wah shook his head. "Maybe a woman, maybe young." I felt a weight settle in my chest. A cut wire was dangerous. Fresh footprints beside a cut wire were worse. I lifted one hand, telling them to stop. At that exact moment, something moved behind the last bamboo fence. A dark shape slipped across the narrow path ahead of us. Tan raised his AK. Wah froze. And I saw, just for a second, a young girl's face staring back at us from the rain. Tan's rifle came up before any of us had time to think. "Don't move," he shouted. The girl froze beside the bamboo fence, half hidden by the rain and the gray light. She could not have been more than 17 or 18. Her black clothes were soaked through, her hair stuck to her cheeks, and her bare feet were covered in mud up to the ankles. For one terrible second, all I saw was danger. A cut wire, fresh tracks, an empty village, a young stranger appearing exactly where our line had been damaged. In that place, at that hour, nothing was simple. Tan's finger was close to the trigger. "Tan," I said, keeping my voice low, "hold." He did not lower the AK. The girl looked at the rifle, then at us. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. She took one small step backward. "Stop," Wah barked. She stopped. I could hear my own breathing inside my ears. The radio on my back hissed with faint static, reminding me why we were there. The battalion needed that line. The forward company was still waiting. Every minute we stood in that village, the wire remained dead. But one wrong shot would stay with us for the rest of our lives. I raised my left hand slowly, palm open, trying to show her we were not going to shoot unless she ran. With my other hand, I pointed to the ground. "Stay there," I said, though I knew she probably did not understand Vietnamese. Hua moved a few steps to the side, careful not to block Tan's line of sight. He had that calm face again, but I saw his jaw working. He was thinking the same thing I was. She might be a civilian. Or she might have been sent to watch the wire. In that war, both things could be true in the same village. Tan whispered. She was near the line. I know. She could be Pon Pot. I know. The girl suddenly clutched at the front of her shirt, as if protecting something inside it. That movement almost killed her. Tan jerked the rifle higher. "Hands out," he shouted. I stepped in fast and pushed the barrel down with my palm. "Not yet," I said. He turned to me, eyes wide. He was scared, not angry. That was important to remember. Men do not always aim because they hate. Sometimes they aim because they are young and soaked and frightened. And the jungle has taught them that hesitation can get friends killed. The girl began to cry without making much noise. Her shoulders shook. She kept one hand pressed against her shirt pocket. Hua spoke softly, using the few Khmer words he knew. "No run. No hurt. Stand." She stared at him, trembling. I moved closer, one slow step at a time. My boots sank into the wet mud. The field telephone knocked against my hip. Somewhere behind us, water dripped from the roof of an empty hut. "Show us," I said, pointing to her pocket. She shook her head. Tan tightened his grip again. "Show us," I repeated, gentler this time. Finally, with shaking fingers, she reached into the pocket. All three of us went still. Her hand came out closed around something wrapped in a piece of banana leaf. For a heartbeat, nobody breathed. Then the wet leaf slipped from her fingers and fell into the mud. It opened just enough for us to see what was inside. Not a grenade. Not a knife. Not a message. A small lump of cold rice, pressed hard by hand, already turning dry at the edges. Tan lowered his AK. Hua looked away. And I stood there in the rain, ashamed of how close we had come. For a long moment, none of us said anything. The girl stood in front of us with rain running down her face. One hand still half raised, the other pressed against her chest as if she had lost the only thing she owned. The little lump of rice lay open in the mud, wrapped in a torn piece of banana leaf. It was small enough to fit inside a child's palm. Tan lowered his AK all the way. He looked embarrassed, almost sick. A minute earlier, he had been ready to shoot. Now he could not even look at her. Hua bent down, picked up the rice carefully, brushed off what mud he could, and folded the leaf back around it. He held it out to her with both hands. She took it quickly and clutched it against her shirt. I had seen soldiers cry over letters from home. I had seen men shake from fever, hunger, and fear, but the way that girl held that rice hurt me in a different place. It was not food to her. It was a promise. Maybe it was for a younger brother. Maybe for an old mother hiding somewhere outside the village. Maybe it was all she had left from a house that no longer felt safe. We did not know. That was the cruel part. In war, you almost never know enough before you have to decide. Hua tried speaking to her again with the few Khmer words he had picked up over months of working near villages. She answered in a broken whisper. I understood none of it. Her voice shook so badly that even Hua had trouble following. After a while, an older man appeared from behind one of the empty huts with both hands raised. He was thin, soaked, and scared enough that his knees seemed loose under him. 2 infantrymen from a nearby security element brought him forward. One of them knew more Khmer than we did. The old man explained in pieces. The girl's name was Srey Mom. Her family had scattered when Pol Pot fighters moved through the area 2 nights earlier. She had come back looking for her little brother and an aunt who could not walk far. The rice in her pocket was for them, if she found them. When the interpreter said that, Tan turned his face away. Nobody mentioned the rifle. Nobody had to. But the old man also said something that kept us from relaxing. Armed men had passed through the edge of Poom Leach before dawn. They had asked about Vietnamese units. They had moved near the tree line where our wire ran. That put the weight back on my shoulders. Srey Mom might not have cut the line, but someone had, and whoever did it knew we would come to fix it. I ordered Tan to keep watch near the fence while Wah checked the line by the last hut. I tried the field telephone again. Nothing. Then I switched on the radio and called command. Signal team to command. We found civilians in Poom Leach. Possible Pol Pot movement through village before dawn. Telephone line still down. Continuing repair. Static answered first. Then a broken voice pushed through. Signal team. Repeat. Forward company changing position. Need line restored immediately. The words faded before the message was complete. I felt my stomach drop. A forward company changing position without steady communication was like a man walking blindfolded through a minefield. One wrong direction, one misunderstood order, and people could disappear into the dark before anyone knew where to look. Wah came back from the hut, his face tight. The line is cut again beyond the village, he said, farther into the trees. Behind him, Srey Mom still held the rice against her chest. Tan stood beside the fence, watching the jungle with both hands on his rifle. For the first time that day, I understood the trap we were in. The girl needed protection. The line needed repair. And I only had 2 men. I looked at Wah, then at Tan, then at the girl with the rice still pressed against her chest. There was no good choice. If all 3 of us stayed in Poom Leach to protect the civilians, the telephone line would remain dead, the forward company would keep moving with only broken radio contact, and command would be guessing in the dark. If all 3 of us went into the trees to repair the line, Srey Mom and the old man would be left near an empty village where armed men had passed only hours before. War was full of those moments. People later talk about courage as if it always comes with clear answers. It does not, most of the time. Courage is just choosing which fear you can live with. I called over the 2 infantrymen who had brought the old man forward. They were not part of our signal team, but they had been securing the edge of the village. One was older, with a tired face and mud all over his sleeves. The other looked even younger than Tan. Stay with the civilians, I told them. Keep them behind the huts. Don't let anyone wander near the wire. The older soldier nodded. Wah stepped closer to me. I should go with you. I shook my head. No, you stay here. He frowned. You need me for the splice. I need someone calm here more. He understood what I meant. Tan was brave, but still too quick with fear. Wah had hands that could fix wire and a voice that could slow a man down before he pulled a trigger. Wah looked toward Srey Mom. She was watching us without understanding our words. But she understood the shape of trouble. Everyone did by then. All right, he said, but take the better roll of wire. He removed the cleaner spool from his pack and handed it to Tan. Then he gave me his last dry strip of tape, wrapped in cloth and tucked inside a cigarette tin. That small gesture nearly broke me. In the jungle, a dry roll of tape was almost as valuable as ammunition to a signal soldier. Tan and I moved out beyond the last hut. The line disappeared into a narrow cut between trees. The rain had stopped, but the leaves kept dripping. The ground sucked at our boots. My fever came in waves now, hot behind the eyes. cold in the spine. I kept one hand on the radio strap and the other on the cable, following it like a lifeline. Behind us, Poom Leach vanished in mist. Tan walked a few yards ahead, carrying the wire spool against his chest. He no longer joked. Every few steps he glanced back, not at me, but toward the village. She was just carrying rice. He said finally, "I know. I almost shot her." "You didn't. That doesn't feel much better." I had no answer for him. Some things a man has to carry alone until time teaches him where to put them. We found the next break in a patch of fallen bamboo. The cable had been cut low and covered with leaves. Tan knelt to pull the loose end free. Then the ground gave way beneath him. He dropped into a shallow hole filled with rainwater and roots. The spool flew from his hands. I heard him cry out, short and sharp. I slid down beside him and grabbed his shoulder. Tan. He was breathing hard, teeth clenched. His left leg had twisted under him, and blood ran from a scrape near his knee. Not a fatal wound, not even close, but in that jungle, a bad leg could turn a short distance into a long nightmare. He tried to stand and nearly fell again. "Leave me here," he said. "Fix the line." I stared at him. The radio on my back cracked once, then faded. The line lay cut in the mud beside us. Behind us were the civilians, and a village that might not stay quiet for long. Ahead of us was the break. For the first time that day, I had to choose between the mission and the man beside me. I did not leave Tan behind. Maybe another man would have. Maybe a harder man, or a better soldier, could have stepped over him, fixed the wire, and come back later, but I was not that man. Tan was 20 years old. He still talked about becoming an electrician when the war ended. He still believed broken things could be repaired if you had enough patience. "Put your arm over my shoulder," I told him. He shook his head. "The line first." "You are part of the line," I said. He looked at me then, and for once he had no joke ready. I dragged him out of the hole and sat him against a bamboo stump. His knee was bleeding, but the joint still moved. Painful, yes. Broken, no. That was enough. I tore a strip from the bottom of my shirt and wrapped it tight around the cut. Then I handed him the field telephone. "You test, I splice." Tan swallowed hard and nodded. The missing section of wire lay somewhere under the wet leaves, but I did not have time to search for all of it. I took Hoa's clean spool and measured out just enough to bridge the gap. My fingers were stiff from fever and rain. The copper kept slipping. Twice I had to stop and wipe mud from the stripped ends. Above us, the jungle dripped and creaked. Behind us, Poom Leach was hidden by trees. I thought of Wa standing near the empty huts, trying to keep calm among frightened civilians and nervous soldiers. I thought of Stray Mom holding that small ball of rice like it was a child's heart. War made strange things important. A dry strip of tape. A weak battery. A handful of rice. A wire no thicker than a shoelace. When I finished the first splice, Tan cranked the phone. "Anything?" I asked. He pressed the handset against his ear. Static. Again. He cranked harder. This time I heard the faint buzz even from where I crouched. Tan's eyes widened. "Command post," he said, weak. I grabbed the handset. "Command, this is Signal Team. Do you read?" The answer came broken, but it came. "Signal Team, read weak, forward company awaiting movement order." I looked at the repaired wire, then at the trees ahead. The signal was open, but barely. One more bad connection and it would die again. "Hold the phone," I told Tan. I moved along the cable another 10 yards and found the problem. The old insulation had split where the wire rubbed against a bamboo edge. Water had seeped inside. It was not a cut this time, just the jungle doing its own quiet damage. I cleaned it with my sleeve, lifted the wire higher, and wrapped the last of Hoa's dry tape around it. Then I heard Tan shout behind me. "They're coming through." For half a second, I thought he meant enemy soldiers. I dropped to one knee and reached for my rifle. But then the field telephone crackled loudly enough for both of us to hear. "Signal team, stand by for urgent order." I crawled back to Tan and took the handset. The commander's voice came through with more strength now. Still rough but clear enough. "Forward company must change direction east of Poom Leach. Repeat, east. Do not proceed along old trail. Possible ambush en route. Confirm relay." My mouth went dry. The old trail was exactly where the forward company would have gone if the line had stayed dead. I repeated every word slowly, forcing myself to be precise. "Change direction east of Poom Leach. Do not proceed along old trail. Possible ambush en route." "Confirmed," command answered. Tan leaned back against the bamboo, eyes closed, rain on his face. For the first time all day, the line stayed alive. But from the village behind us, one rifle shot cracked through the trees. The rifle shot from Poom Leach cut through the trees like a snapped wire. Tan opened his eyes at once. I grabbed my rifle with one hand and the field telephone with the other. For a second, I was torn in two directions again. The line was alive. Command had just passed an order that could save the forward company from walking into an ambush. But Wah was back in the village, and so was the girl. Then the telephone crackled. "Signal team, confirm relay to forward company." I forced myself to breathe. This was the kind of moment that never leaves a signal soldier. Every part of you wants to run toward the gunfire. But the voice in the handset is also a life. Maybe many lives. If I dropped that phone, men ahead of us might never get the warning. I pressed the handset to my ear. "Forward company, this is signal team. Change direction east of Poom Leach. Do not use old trail. Possible ambush. Confirm." Static hissed back. I repeated it. "Change direction east. Do not use old trail. Confirm." At last, a faint voice came through. "Forward company confirms. Moving east." Only then did I let the handset fall against my chest. "Can you walk?" I asked Tan. He pushed himself up with a grimace. "I can limp." "That's enough." I threw his arm over my shoulder, and we started back toward the village. Slow and ugly, slipping in the mud. Every few steps I looked at the wire to make sure it still held. That thin black line ran beside us through the trees. Quiet now, as if it had not just carried a warning through the jungle. When we reached the first hut, Wah was alive. He was kneeling beside one of the infantrymen, pressing a bandage against the man's forearm. The younger soldier had fired the shot after seeing movement near the fence. No one had been killed. A shadow had slipped away into the brush. Maybe a Pon Pot scout. Maybe just another frightened person. In war, even after the shooting stopped, certainty was hard to find. Srey Mom sat behind a wall of bamboo, shaking but unharmed. The old man was beside her. She still held the rice. Wah looked up when he saw us. "Line?" he asked. "Alive," I said. He nodded, and for the first time that day, his face softened. A few minutes later, the radio brought clearer news. The forward company had changed direction in time. They later reported signs of a prepared ambush along the old trail, disturbed soil, cut branches, and a firing position facing the path. We never saw the ambush ourselves. Signal soldiers rarely saw the full result of their work. We only heard voices, passed words, and hoped the words arrived before it was too late. That evening, the rain finally stopped. We gathered near the edge of Poom Leach and shared what little food we had left. Tan had half a packet of dried rice. I had a few hard crumbs in my pocket. Wah poured the last clean water from his dented canteen into a cup and gave it first to the wounded infantryman, then to Srey Mom. Nobody spoke much. The jungle made its night sounds around us, insects, frogs, leaves dripping, distant branches moving in the dark. Those sounds had frightened me earlier. Now they only made me tired. Srey Mom was handed over to local authorities and villagers who could verify who she was and help search for her family. Before she left, she looked at the three of us for a long moment. Then she reached into her pocket. I thought she was taking out the rice again. Instead, she handed Wa the torn banana leaf that had wrapped it. There was nothing valuable about it. It was wet, creased, and stained with mud, but Wa folded it carefully and put it inside his cigarette tin with the tape. Years later, I understood why. That day, we kept a telephone line alive. But that small piece of leaf reminded us what kind of world the line was passing through. We left Poom Leach the next morning. There was no victory speech, no cheering, no clean ending like people sometimes imagine in war stories. The forward company had avoided the old trail and reached its new position before night fully closed in. The battalion commander later told us our repaired line had made the difference. He said it plainly, without drama, then moved on to the next problem. That was how the war worked. One line fixed, one order delivered, one danger avoided, then another broken road, another sick man, another dead radio battery, another stretch of jungle waiting for us. Tan limped for several days after that. He complained more about the ruined wire spool than about his knee, which was his way of saying he was all right. Wa kept the torn banana leaf in his cigarette tin for a while, folded beside his dry tape and a photo of the girl he hoped to marry back home. I never saw Srey Mom again. I do not know if she found her brother. I do not know if her aunt survived. For many years, that bothered me. A soldier remembers the people he could not follow to the end of their story. We pass through their lives for 1 hour, one day, maybe one rainy afternoon, and then the war pulls us away. After Poom Leach, our team kept doing what signal soldiers did. We carried field telephones through mud. We dragged communication wire over streams and through thorn bushes. We slept beside radio sets with one ear open. We ate dried rice from damp cloth bags and drank from dented canteens that tasted of metal and smoke. We shook with malaria, changed batteries with numb fingers, and learned to tell by sound alone whether static meant distance, weather, or a dying set. Wa was sent home the following year after a bad fever nearly took him. He survived, but the jungle had taken something out of him that never fully came back. Tan did become an electrician after the war. The last time I saw him, he laughed and said civilian wires were kinder because they did not get cut by men hiding in the trees. As for me, I grew old with small objects. In a wooden box at my house, I still keep a short piece of communication wire from that line near Poom Leach. The insulation is cracked, one end is blackened where we stripped and twisted it in the rain. Beside it is a little cigarette tin Wa gave me years later. The banana leaf inside is gone now, dried into dust long ago, but I remember it clearly. I remember Tan's rifle rising. I remember Hoa's hands giving the rice back to that girl. I remember the voice on the telephone saying the forward company had changed direction east. People often ask veterans what sound stays with them the longest. They expect gunfire, explosions, shouting. I remember those too, but the sound that follows me most is smaller. The weak buzz of a field telephone coming alive after hours of silence. That buzz meant someone could still be reached. It meant a warning could still arrive in time. It meant we had not lost one another completely. And whenever I hold that old piece of wire, I think of Poom Leach, of a girl almost shot because war had made everyone afraid, of a handful of rice mistaken for danger, and of 3 signal soldiers trying, in all that rain and fear, to keep one thin line of humanity from breaking.